welcome to this episode of Healthwise 360, a creation of Clarissa Burt, founder of In the Limelight Media. I am your show host, Chrissy Cordingley, and you'll be able to see this interview on In the Limelight TV, which is distributed on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and 100 other smart TV apps. And the audio version of this interview can be heard wherever you listen to your podcasts. And today I am excited and thrilled to be interviewing Susana Stoica of Healing Alternatives and author of the book, Healing with a Loving Heart, Discover the Power of Energy Healing. Susana was born a healer and trained as a computer design engineer, and the combination of the two made her a creative engineer where her work includes several US patents and a Ph.D. in computers designed with brain cell-like circuits, as well as an inquisitive healer. She's one smart cookie. Having a passion for sharing her knowledge, she has taught courses at universities, including Harvard Medical School, the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, and Wayne State University. Her work in delayed brain trauma was published in a peer-reviewed medical journal, and she is currently working on her 10th book on healing. So welcome, Susana.
Thank you for having me, Chrissy.
So happy to have you. So I would like to actually start with a little bit of a personal story, if that's okay, because that's your work changing from computers to healing and brain trauma actually came from a bit of a personal story where you had to sort of unlock your own healing. Is that correct? Could you share a little bit about what happened and how that empowered you to help others?
Actually, I did in parallel the engineering and the healing. I heard that I had this capability very early on, but I didn't remember. My dad remembered it. And then when I was married and I had a kid, my husband used to have really bad backaches and needed help with it because he wouldn't go to the doctor. You know, these proud people who don't go to the doctor. So I figured I have to help him because he was in really bad pain for weeks at a time. And I ended up studying first reflexology, but he was too ticklish. So all went out the window. And then I found a book actually in Canada in the biggest bookstore, which was about a healing, energetic healing based on Chinese medicine. And I studied it, and at the very end of the book, I had a phrase, don't try it on your own. You need to have proper training because otherwise you might get unexpected reactions. And I heard about those unexpected reactions later on after, because if you release energetic patterns, the trauma too fast, people can get really violent. So I didn't know that. I followed the advice, and I found a course very soon after when I was looking for it. And at the course, when we were practicing, my hands took off. I didn't have control of my hands anymore. I couldn't stop them. I couldn't move them. I had no control whatsoever. And I got so scared. And I looked at the teacher because everybody was practicing 2x2. And he just did like this, follow it, calm down. And in about 20 minutes, we stopped. My hand stopped. Everybody was looking at me, what the heck I was doing. Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. And very interestingly, during this event, I had some images in my mind. And very unusual images. One was that from the lung of this person, some gray fumes came out. It looked like it. And I don't know how I knew. I had to throw a white light at it. And the other one is that I found myself floating inside a very famous, actually UNESCO protected church in Romania, and it's a famous church, very beautiful, which has very, very tall stained glass windows and the famous organ. And I could hear the Bach music. And so we stopped. I was completely speechless. And we went for lunch. And the lady I was working on says I couldn't put anything in my mouth. I was so shocked. And this lady was chattering all the time. And she said, you know, a month ago, I had this really bad flu and I couldn't breathe afterwards. And whatever the doctors tried, all sorts of antibiotics, nothing helped. They couldn't find anything in my lung when they did the tests. But now I can breathe finally. And she showed us that she was completely free. She was breathing. And then as we went back to the class, she turned around and she said, you know, I have to tell you, I had these very strange images while you were working on me. And she gives me back exactly the images which I saw. Now, this scared me even more because I had no idea what I was working with. And it didn't fit my engineering background at all.
No, that would be the opposite to science,
exactly.
Right? Almost, yeah.
And we went back. I went through the class. It was terrible because in the class, this method of healing, you are supposed to push deeper or not as deep into the body. And every time I tried to push into the body, my hands would lift, like some power would lift my hands off the body. So I flunked in my eyes, I flunked the class, but the teacher said that, don't worry, that's what you should be doing. And I said, what is that? And she said, you will have to find out for yourself. So it took me about 2 years to figure it out. And I started doing healing in a intentional way when my son was diagnosed with a tumor on his adrenals. And I was able to, I said, I have to do it. Because if I was able to help that lady, I have to help my son.
Absolutely.
And I was able to help him, to the amazement of the doctor. His adrenal were hot. I thought my hands will get burnt. It's so hot. And in 3 days, they were completely normal. A voice told me to work on him the whole week. And when we went back to the doctor, he was amazed because his tests were completely normal. And nothing was found at the X-ray. So that started, of course, the doctor, knowing what I was doing, started sending me people, these impossible cases. So that's how my life as a healer started. And on the way, at one point, I told my dad, you know what happened to me? I have no idea what it is. And I explained to me what happened at the course. He said, oh, you were doing it when you were 7 years old.
Really?
And he said, I said, what are you talking about? He said, remember when your mom walked into a window and cut her head? It was a very bad cut, and it was profuse bleeding, and my dad couldn't see blood. He would faint. As strong a person as he was, he automatically fainted at the sight of blood. So he gave the 7-year-old cotton and gauze and sulfa, because that's what we were using at the time. And he was shouting from the kitchen what I have to do. And I remember, because it was so unusual, that I was directed to walk my finger on the cut back and forth, and then sideways till the bleeding stopped. And then I bandaged my mom. And then my dad said they went to the doctor. Actually, the bleeding was so bad that they called out the ambulance.
Oh, wow.
To take her to the doctor. And when they opened it up, the doctor said, look, if you would have come right away, I would have put clamps, quite a few clamps, because at that time there were these metal clamps. But now there is nothing I can do. By the way, when did this happen? And he said, my dad very proudly says, about 2 hours ago. And what said, you should have seen the doctor's face. So that's a story. And then I started having people refer to me as I was working as an engineer. And actually what I found absolutely interesting was that being a healer and working in a space of intuition, because that's what healing works with, you have to have a good intuition and insight into what's happening with a person and have to let free, as opposed to engineering where you have to be very, very regimented.
Yes.
I became very inventive, and also it brought, I was inventive as a child too, but it even enhanced it, and I was able to do absolutely impossible things. They called me Mikey, because Mikey, this project is crazy, give it to Susana. Ad with the Mikey who eats cereal, because no one wants to touch that new stuff.
Yeah, like you've designed computers that work like brains. Like isn't it amazing that it's like both sides of your brain were opened up as you learned to embrace more, like you had more access to it. So share to us, how do we heal? What does healing actually mean? You talked a bit about intuition, but what is healing?
Every person, actually every living thing, even stones, have an energy field, which is people who are sensitive can feel it. And actually anyone can feel it if you have a good person to teach you how to feel it. And this energy field, to my utter surprise as an engineer, is what governs our health. Is like the software for a computer hardware. So our physical body is the hardware, and the software which controls how we actually react is this energy field. Now, if we have trauma or we are very tired, the makeup of the field changes. Now, if we correct what changed in the field immediately, then the physical doesn't change. But if we leave it, for example, we are constantly exhausted, eventually the physical will change. And that has an explanation. Actually, Bruce Lipton has a book called Biology of Belief. And he did some experiments and found that the proteins in our body curve with stress. Now imagine that we are, what is a DNA? It's a helix, right? So the helix, if the protein bends, what happens? The helix tightens. Now this helix is like a ladder, and it's supposed to split in two vertically, and half of it goes to the new cell and half of it dies off. Now if it's tight, the split is not correct. It has mistakes, and that's the explanation why we get sick.
Oh, so interesting.
Because the replication doesn't happen properly. Related to this, when I started healing, I thought that emotions are about 5% of our well-being. I can tell you emotions are 90%, sometimes 100% of our well-being.
Yes.
It's amazing. That was one of our biggest surprises. And how we live our lives, how we look at the world around us is actually what we manifest in our lives. Because we can, you can see a person who is terribly disabled, but very cheerful and very smart. I have a nephew who is very disabled from MS, and he's the smartest guy, and he goes to parties. And he is welcome at the parties because he has this absolute fantastic attitude. And you find people who have everything, and they are miserable. One case was of a woman who had millions of dollars. She was very well off through her husband, through her inheritance from her family, and her grandpa died. And there were 5 siblings, and the grandpa left about $10 million. And he decided that from the 5 siblings, each one will get $1 million, and the one which was disabled gets the rest.
Oh.
So the ones who had money and were able to take care of themselves got 1 million, and the one who disabled and needed 24 hours help got the rest, so can get the best of care. Mm-hmm. This woman made herself sick because she wanted to have the other million, which was due to her. And she was so miserable that she ended up developing terrible allergies, and they were becoming worse and worse as the time was passing. And whatever the doctors tried didn't work. So the doctor had enough, sent her to me and said, maybe you can figure it out. And we figured it out, and I worked with her, and she eventually gave up her idea, recognized that it was stupid to, basically the lawyers were taking the money. Mm-hmm. And finally she realized what she was doing, and her allergies disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's psychosomatic, right? In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so how do we heal? So if maybe our DNA hasn't split correctly in that, like what is the process that we go through to start healing?
So what is happening is that you have many avenues of healing. Mm-hmm. And you have to this energy field acts as a template. So if the template is wrong and we become sick, actually we can correct the template and become healthy. Unless the health problem is caused by a trauma, usually a healer can see it ahead of time in the field and prevent a person from getting sick. Mm. So if you have regular healing sessions or acupuncture or Tai Chi or meditation, you can prevent yourself from getting sick. If it's trauma, what is interesting, many times even the trauma is caused by emotional reasons. And in order to fully heal from the trauma, from physical trauma, you have to resolve the emotional trauma. Mm-hmm. You have to solve the emotional part. And one thing that is interesting is how much cancer is related to emotional trauma. Cancer is, in my experience, cancer is always an unresolved emotional problem. Gives a person getting sick, not that the person wants to get sick, but subconsciously generates this illness, which gets out from the problem, so switches off the problem. For the most typical example is a mom who does everything for everybody. She cooks, she takes care of the kids, she takes them to all the activities, and no one is helping her. And finally, she gets sick, and she gets very sick, and everybody is helping her.
Yeah.
And that case, I had a case with a woman who came to me because she had partial mastectomy, so her breast cut off because of cancer. And even then, her tests showed that she's going to have another cancer, because she had a 2 and a 4-year-old. Oh. And when we worked together, I found out that what the problem was, subconsciously she wanted to get out of being volunteered by her husband, who was very involved with the church. He volunteered his wife to work as a volunteer, collecting money from the rich parishioner and giving it to the poorer ones. Now she was a very kind woman, so she was very successful. So more people came to their church, and eventually the rich parishioner said, I gave and gave and gave. I can't give all the time. And people on the other side were pulling her, saying, you gave me, why don't you give me more? And she was in this seesaw, and the only way to get out of it was to get sick. So once we found out what was the reason, she says, now, how do I talk to my husband and tell him to let me off the hook with the church? And I said, it's very easy. You go to him and you tell him, what do you prefer, to raise the kids on your own, or you want, or you want me healthy? Yes. So she went home, and her husband said, absolutely, no, I didn't realize that you were in such a seesaw of emotions. Absolutely, do whatever is best for you. I want you with me. So she comes next time very happy, but at the same time very worried. How do I talk to the priest to tell him that I'm not going to do it? And I said, look, tell him that you are going to do something else. You are going to volunteer. You did this, and now you would like to do something else, and figure out if you want what you want to do. So she got to the priest. She said, I would like to do something else. The priest said, no. You take care of yourself. Take all the time you need. Get well, and then we'll talk. Amazing. So she was delighted. Suddenly her field is perfect, holding the energy. She goes, takes the test, and he said, I have better tests. She called me up delighted. I have better tests than in 15 years. Amazing. All this cancer was about 3 or 4 years. So she was delighted.
That's amazing. You know, and it kind of makes me think of the saying where as thick as our secrets, right? Like it was emotion that for some reason she didn't feel safe to express, right? And it just sticks in our energy. It sticks inside, and it manifests in physical ways. So you're focusing a lot on brain trauma. Why brain trauma? Why is this so important for you to focus on?
For me, brain trauma is especially important because I had several brain traumas. 2 of them on the same day.
Oh my goodness.
Actually, at the time, I was at the peak of my career as an engineer, and after hours, I was working in a medical practice, helping doctors to diagnose complicated illnesses, because I can see in the field what actually started the problem when people come to the doctor and they have everything is wrong. Yeah. I can see in the field what was the sequence of things. So if I can pull the original problem out, and I can tell the doctors, do such and such a test, and you will see that's the worst part. Then if we correct that, the person it's like a deck of cards, it collapses. The person gets faster, so fast, much faster than anything else. Plus they save a lot of money in tests, time and money and everything. So I worked that, plus I was doing healing in the practice. And one beautiful weekend, a doctor from another practice wanted to send us his problem cases and asked me to give him a demo before, it was a Saturday, so before the patients were coming. And I did the demo, and I locked the door for the patients, the door for the doctors. And then when I came out through the doctor's door, I tried to go to the patient door to check that it's well locked, and I hit a black ice. because it was a beautiful February, cold morning, and it was sunny. The skies completely clear and sunny in winter, which are gorgeous, and then you get the black ice. And I fell from a standing position, nothing on my head, on my back, on cement, and knowing that the patients were coming at 1 o'clock, I, in a very confused state, I went and I bought some salt to make the black ice melt. And when I was very, very careful, and still, because I was so out of it, I fell again. And the doctors told me that was a major event, because already my neck muscles pulled my head back. So when I fell again and hit the back of my head, it was really bad. So at that point, I had to decide if I was staying or going. And I heard my son's voice, so I decided to stay and fight my way back. And it was a long fight, because when I got up, I couldn't remember words in any of the languages I speak, and I'm fluent in 3.
Wow.
Words, phrases was out of question. For years, I couldn't see well. Just every bone in my body was out of place, including fingers and toes.
Oh.
The palate, the bones were on top of each other, or my skull bones were jammed. I couldn't turn my head at all. I was turning on in full body. It was a mess. Anyway, I couldn't learn anything new. So my career as an engineer was gone. I couldn't do healing, because if I tried to do healing, I got even worse headaches. And no one could help me with the headaches till a year and a half later. I was sleeping only in a lazy boy, if you know what is that.
Yeah, you can only sitting up, right?
Yeah,
Couldn't lay down.
in a sitting position. And I couldn't lie down, because as horrible as the headaches were, when I tried to lie down, it was even worse. And 2.5 years into it, it was discovered that one of the valves that let the spinal fluid go into the brain and go down was blocked. So the spinal fluid would go up in the brain, but it couldn't go down.
Oh.
Yeah. And then one night I couldn't take the pain anymore. And I said, God, I can't. I tried everything I know. I use my knowledge. By that time, I was working 15 years with brain injuries. So I use my knowledge of brain injuries, but still I couldn't stop the headaches, which were horrible. And I said, God, I can't take it anymore. I can't live this way. And I heard a voice telling me what to do. I did it. And suddenly I didn't have headache. It came back next day. And then every day I had to test something else to do. And eventually I got rid of the headaches. And slowly I recovered. On my way to recovery, I found a lot of people who were offering help, but it was no help at all. And I spent so much money for nothing. So I decided that when I was still very sick and hardly functional, that I am going to get out of it, and I am going to write a book to help people who have brain injuries, so they don't spend the money, because I had also frontal brain injury. So anyone whoever told me to do something, I would do it, because you don't have that filter.
The judgment part is gone, right?
Yeah,
You're just trusting. Yeah.
Exactly. So I knew that I'm going to write that book, and eventually it became a reality. It's called Heal Your Brain, Reclaim Your Life.
Mm-hmm.
So and also because I couldn't find any healer to do the work I was doing, I decided that it would be the most beneficial if I work with brain injuries, which doesn't mean that I can't work with anything else. I did work, but brain injuries are especially different from the rest of the work on the body. And I had, for example, a case, a lady in Romania who her daughter knew me and called me up saying that my mom was taken by my dad to the hospital with horrible headaches. And can you look into it? And it was 7-hour difference compared to where I am. And I said, okay, I will look at her. And when I went and I looked, I saw that she had a brain bleed.
Oh.
And that's why it was a horrible headache. And I was able to stop the bleed and actually resolved it somewhat by next morning. Now, the woman had an MRI when she went into the hospital, and they were shocked the next morning because I worked during the night in Romania. Next morning, she was on her bed and asking for food.
Oh,
wow. Completely.
Feeling better.
And they were so shocked. They did another MRI, and they said, oh my God, this is the bleeding stopped. And the first MRI shows the bleeding, the second MRI shows the resorbed blood.
It's all resolved. Amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I am so grateful every time I can help somebody this way.
So is this something unique to you, or the things in your book, things can people do for themselves, or do they have to have, like, is what you have a gift, or is it partially learned? Like, can other people develop this ability?
I didn't find anyone doing this, what I am doing, unfortunately. And I was trying to put together a course, and I didn't figure yet out how to teach what I know, because it's so much intuition and letting go, and it's very difficult for people to let go of the judgment and just let it happen. And it's very difficult because of that to teach it. One day.
One day somebody will. Now, you wrote the book originally 20 years ago, and now you're in the process of rewriting it, right? So
I rewrote the book, Healing with the original title was Healing with a Loving Heart, is this one. And I rewrote it because originally they were only stories of healing. Because people were, I was asked to tell people about experiences of healing to better understand what healing is and how it works. And eventually, as I acquired more and more knowledge, I wanted to help people help themselves. I am a strong believer of not only doing the healing work with somebody, but teaching them how to stay healthy and what to do to stay healthy. So the most recent book, Healing with a Loving Heart, is also every chapter of story has more stories, of course, has what to do if you have this diagnosis. Now, I have to tell you that we don't work with labels as a healer. As you well know, you can have a certain problem and the doctor has a hard time to figure out what is it coming from. For example, headaches are a typical thing. It can come from the liver, it can come from kidneys, it can come from low iron, it can come for bad circulation in your brain, only stress. So it's very difficult, but to define. So they run a lot of tests on you. So in that chapter about headaches, I give people some ideas what they can do in order to help the doctor diagnose easier a headache.
Yes.
Or because it's very important to give the doctor helping information.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you run test after test after test, and many times you can't figure out what is happening, because we are a system, and modern medicine unfortunately considers people as pieces.
Yes.
Right, the hand, the foot, the eyes, the head, the nose. We are not a system, but we are in medical science, because they are trying to classify stuff, and sometimes it doesn't lend itself very easily to this classification. Healers work with what is wrong in the energy field.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening in the energy field, for example, if you have pus, you have a sinus infection and you have pus, the energy field will be sick, much thicker than normal. So you take that thickness away and the inflammation disappears.
Mm-hmm.
Or, for example, if somebody has a broken bone, you have a break in your field. In energy work, you can correct the weave of the energy field, and the bone will heal very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So we can help a lot ourselves by understanding these things.
Yes.
by doing certain things for ourselves to keep healthy and to get healthy if we get sick.
Yes, I love that. I wanted to just end with a question about, because you talked about a lot of the issues really stem from emotion, and an emotion that seems to be quite prevalent in society and all of us a lot today lately seems to be anger. And you talk a little bit on your website about, anger really has a lot of negative, like prolonged anger. I mean, it's natural to become angry sometimes. It's still a natural human emotion, but prolonged anger can really lead to some really tough issues of poverty, abuse, and major illness. So how does someone recognize that maybe their anger is bordering on that unhealthy level, and what steps could they take to start to work through the process of releasing it so that they're not so triggered, that they're not so angry, that they're not holding on to this emotion that is so toxic?
Generally, in order to be able to better deal with one's emotions, it's the best thing is to train yourself to see the glass half full. Recognize one thing that I have seen is that always you will find people who are much worse off than you are, and recognize the blessings in your life. Because for example, I was in my situation, it's a long story, but I was at a point where I literally didn't have money for food.
Mm-hmm.
But I focused on the fact that I was young and healthy, and I had a wonderful son, and I found joy in it. And I focused on what was positive. When you are on a base of looking at the blessings in your life, because you have a lot of blessings, from the nice sunshine, which is one day, or the rain, which comes in places where rain is welcome, to a pet that you have, a loving pet you have, you can find a lot of stuff which is really a blessing in your life. And when you have that base of, it creates an equilibrium in your field. So it strengthens your energy field. Interestingly, you are not so swayed by negativity. But if you are always angry, always looking at how people are taking advantage of me, my boss is horrible. My people who I am working with are all getting ahead and I am left behind. If you have this attitude, you are just putting more fire, more wood on the fire, basically. For example, I had a colleague in my engineering practice who were given both of us the same assignment. It was in engineering, it was something that was a very repetitive work. And he was pissed to the nth degree, and he was complaining every day that is a technician's work, it's not an engineer's work. Engineers are supposed to be inventive. And what I said, no, because a technician will do repetitively. You are expected to do something better. Do it in a better way. Find a better way. And he complained and complained and complained that I am intellectually lazy in the way that I always look for an easy way to do things. So I figured out how can I reduce my work by 50%, literally. And actually it was a way, it became a way it was generating the functions for very large scale integrated circuits. And it became the standard way of design. And the guy complained so much that eventually he got laid off. He was creating such a bad environment. So instead of focusing, we have a certain amount of energy. You have a choice. You can use your energy to create something nice, to enjoy life, or you can use the same energy to become miserable, more and more and more miserable. It's your choice.
I sort of had a little vision of, when your energy is healthy and positive, it's sort of like a force field, right? You're more resilient, things bounce off you a little bit easier. And when it's anger energy, it's more like a magnet, like you're just sucking it in like a black hole, right? Like it's just so easy to attach to, like static or Velcro, right? It just like.
Yeah. Actually, when I was teaching about healing, at courses, I have an exercise when I teach people how to perceive energy. I tell them, okay, I am going now to think about something very positive. And usually I think about my son or my grandkids. And my energy becomes big. And I teach them how to feel the energy field. And I say to them, now I'm going to think about something really upsetting. And you can feel the energy field literally collapsing. And by the way, the energy field acts as a kind of protective shield around us. So when you are in a positive frame of mind, you don't get sick as easily. But when it's collapsed, actually, it seems like the bugs just stick to you.
Yeah. Just keeps coming. Just keep coming.
Yeah. And by the way, if people want to find out how to do some very, very simple healing exercises to understand this energy, my book on Reluctant Healer has at the end some very, very simple exercises where anyone can do them.
Perfect. And your website is healingbraininjury.com, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Good.
And people can find a lot of information about healing on that website.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a wonderful website. There are so many resources. I really enjoyed looking through it this weekend. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Are there any last thoughts you would like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
You asked me if I would be willing to give the audience any handouts. And my email is the same as my website, which is healingbraininjury@gmail.com. And if you send me an email with telling me that you would be interested to get the book, I will send you a link and you pay only for the shipping.
The shipping. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, thank you.
And I
That's
will
a great
send you the
offer.
original book, Healing with a Loving Heart.
I love that. I love
This is
that.
not available anywhere. Only if you will send me the email.
That's wonderful. That's very generous. Thank you so much, Susana. It's been a true pleasure speaking to you. I'm really excited to see your work continue and grow and blossom and see all the good that you're putting into the world. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a very interesting discussion. I enjoyed it.
That's great.